We have our tech team in the Ukraine, realizing the responsibility that you have as a leader, looking at things that are way out of your control and how do we plan for that? How do we allow for that? I think that's defined our culture a little bit because we've really obviously supported the team, but we've done fundraising for the war efforts, and it's a really big part of our culture.
Hi, I am Sophie Vaux, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders in the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best teams and company cultures in order to create the best games. Speaking to hundreds of game executives in the show, I have identified recurring patterns and mistakes that we all make in our leadership journey. Do you have to go through the same hurdles and make the same mistakes to learn too? You are not alone in this journey, and hopefully, you can learn from a diverse range of seasoned leaders who already walked the talk. Every episode brings actionable insights and case studies that will help you improve your management skills, self-awareness, and empathic communication. Becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. Are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rise and Play. New voice here, sans husky French accent from sunny California across the pond. I'm Tiffany Keller. You may have heard or read my thoughts on the Deconstructor of Fun podcast and blog. I met Sophie Vaux many years back at the Nordic Games Conference while she was still a studio GM at Voodoo, and I was living in Copenhagen as the director of product at Cybo Games on Subway Surfers. We clicked back then, really, not just as two women leading in gaming, but as people interested in finding our unique voice through philosophy, meditation, and leadership. Sophie since remained a mentor for me, whether it's asking all my team leaders to take her masterclass on building anti-fragile teams or understanding her perspective on advising and investment. Sophie and I have really just always shared a love of leading with vulnerability and connection. For a little more about me, I have worked in gaming for the past decade in product management across several billion-dollar plus earning franchises and some of games' biggest acquisitions in the business. I began in gaming at Zynga during the start of its turnaround phase. Then, to prove to myself the world doesn't revolve around Silicon Valley, I moved to Europe for half a decade, working in Copenhagen and Activision Blizzard's King office in London and Barcelona. Our early team really focused on the theory crafting there for how to make ad monetization really a high quality experience for both players and brands. And we really did some bespoke live ops activations. So really since then, I've focused a lot on monetization, experimentation, and building out the systems that support them while I was a director at Cybo through its Miniclip acquisition and then at Scopely and Midcore. So I am really excited to have Joanne here to talk more about the ecosystem that supports games through advertising and monetization tools. Many gaming professionals may not realize exactly how unique it is that the gaming universes we create are so data rich. It's really valuable experience that we have teasing insights out of this data to better serve players. And this also prepares us for careers in a bunch of adjacent industries that touch gaming across the tech stack. And that's a really useful thing to remember during what can sometimes feel like Game-ageddon in the midst of all these layoffs. So I would love to welcome Joanne Lacey, the COO and board director at AdInMo. AdInMo is a privacy-first game monetization platform that works with mobile game publishers and developers to monetize free-to-play games. They also have a market research project where they have a survey link in the show notes that they would love for any of the gaming professionals or ad tech professionals listening to take and lend their voice to. Just as a note of disclosure, I'm also an advisor to AdInMo, Joanne has multiple decades sitting in the C-suite of several ad tech companies that have found successful acquisitions into top platforms like Unity. But I'll let her now tell her story of how a non-gamer ended up so intertwined with the gaming industry.
Thanks, Tiffany, for the introduction. Nice to be here. Just to maybe introduce AdInMo in the first instance. So AdInMo is an in-game monetization platform. And the reason we were founded was really to make the in-game advertising experience less bad for players. Most of the people that founded the company and the senior leadership team, including myself, we have a long experience in game development and the free-to-play market. And so it was really trying to take a player-centric approach to in-game monetization and all the challenges that brings for the market. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about my experience and also a little bit more about what AdInMo is doing.
I think we can all remember the early days of ads in games where a lot of it was just accidental clicks, right? But I think that you guys have a non-disruptive format that's really interesting. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about what you guys are currently offering and what you're working on.
Sure. Accidental clicks is a really good segue because we're now really focused on intentional clicks. So right now, one of the projects that I'm working on is prepping for our next product release or our next SDK release, which is really, we hope, game changing for the medium of in-game advertising. And it's really exciting bringing the whole company, so tech and commercial, together to be working towards this release. So AdInMo's SDK works in audio ads, display ads, video ads, and we really came from the premise that there should be no click because that was disruptive to the format, and this is all about immersion and not interrupting gameplay, as you say. But a click has a really useful mechanic if it's for a certain goal. And so the team have been working on a new release and rolling out to closed beta with our existing developer partners.
I know that you've also said a couple times there that you guys are privacy first. So can you explain a little bit more about what that means and how you might be different from using like a Unity ads mediation?
Sure. So the second reason AdInMo was founded was not only to make the in-game ad experience better, but to do it without user tracking. And so our platform, with its privacy-first approach, is all about using not only contextual signals, but also behavioral signals, understanding affinities, but doing that without, we don't care who you are, where you are, but we do care what you do in-game. And only in that game. You might behave differently when you're playing a match 3 game to when you're playing online with your friends, and you'll have different behaviors. You might want to receive different messages at that point in time. So that's what we mean by privacy first approach, that we don't use any personal data.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, for anyone who isn't familiar with this side of the gaming business, it's typically been pretty impossible to get those systems to talk to each other of what is your in-game segmentation behaviors, and then hooking that up to how might that influence how many ads you show, what ads that you show to players. You must have a ton of experience then in the advertising industry to be able to know the other side of that marketplace and really connect them through, because you guys are also going back and offering a product to the brands and the ad networks as well, right? So maybe if you could talk a little bit more about the start of your career. I know that you started over in Germany and how you found your way into advertising and ads and gaming.
Yeah, I'd love to say that my whole career was completely planned and well thought through, and I'm sure everybody would like to say that. But there's been a few sliding door moments throughout my career that have shaped where I am today. So you're right. At my first job, I started my career in Germany as a marketing manager in a really large multinational chemical company. So very different to games or advertising.
And from there, how did you get into the games industry?
Honestly, by accident. So my first job, I came back to the UK, I did a master's, and I worked for an agency. So already starting to look more towards the advertising industry. but I applied for a role in a tech company called Digital Bridges. So that was my first job in the games industry. They just raised lots of money and they were scaling the team, and it was all about building a mobile games platform. This was in 2000, so pre-Apple, pre any concept of apps, and when no one had ever heard of the mobile games industry, including the games industry.
We were at least at CDs at that point, right?
Yeah, no, I'm not that old. So I joined that company because I wanted to be part of a tech startup. From a communications point of view, that's an amazing experience to help grow a business, and I was very focused on B2B communications. So it was very targeted in terms of I wanted to go on that journey. The fact that it was in the games industry was a coincidence, and actually I probably nearly didn't get the job, and I've told this story many times, but I was interviewed by the CMO, and that was a formal interview, but then they were a startup and they got other people to do the second interview, and one of his questions was, so what games do you play? I literally just stopped and was like, I don't play games. And that was kind of like, whoa, okay, end of conversation. And fast forward 25 years, that guy is a good friend of mine, but also an investor in AdInMo, funnily enough. And yeah, and I still don't really play games. But that kind of, in a way, that's shaped the whole career. That the games industry is amazing. It's such a community, and I'm very proud to be part of it. But you're kind of always on the edge of it unless you're, in my view, in its core platforms, core development roles. I think it's changing, but certainly back then, it didn't feel like we were automatically allowed to be part of the games industry.
I think that Digital Bridges was also where you met your co-founder, Kristan, right?
That's right. So Kristen was part of the commercial team during those early years of mobile games. So we published mobile games platform wise, but I'm talking about WAP, then SMS, which we try not to talk about, and then Java. So this again was all pre-iPhone. And we released mobile versions of EA Sports FIFA titles, Tiger Woods titles. We worked with Namco, Taito on lots of converting arcade classics, which kind of made sense. We worked with Square Enix on Tomb Raider. So yeah, so Kristen was part of that original commercial team. He was actually out in Asia. He's got obviously a big mobile market, Asia, and Kristen has a lot of experience in that market. So that's where I first met him.
Wow, I feel like you guys are checking one of the founder dream team boxes that you often can't in startups, which is founders have worked together starting 30 years ago.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it does come up in fundraising conversations as a, you know, we all accept that we have a heritage and that we've already entered into we're veterans when we get described, but the fact that we've worked together, and actually more than once, I also worked with him on another startup a few years later that was a mobile games aggregator here in the UK.
Yeah, so I think now that might be a great segue into when it became more than games publishing and how you transitioned into advertising for games.
Sure. So I got my first taste of kind of moving out of pure publishing for mobile and aggregation when I worked for a platform company, a data analytics company serving the games industry. It was when the free-to-play ecosystem was really getting going. Apple and Android had arrived. It's for a company called Delta DNA, which eventually was acquired by Unity in 2019. And it was really interesting to focus on the business model of gaming rather than individual game titles and success or failure on a title by title basis. So that was, first time I started looking at monetization and really the free to play model. Before then at Player X, we were aggregating essentially premium games that would retail for $5 and you could buy from Verizon or any mobile network operator around the world. And after Delta DNA, then I was the COO, and that's the first time I took a leadership role at a trade body called the Mobile Ecosystem. And so their members are different vendors and platforms, network operators, device manufacturers operating within the mobile ecosystem.
It also sounds like you were probably juggling a lot during that time with personal projects at the same time as sitting in the C-suite.
Yeah, so it was fun times, and yeah, you have lots of, in a trade body, you always have lots of projects. And I think any organization that I've worked in, be it professionally or privately as a volunteer, then I bring a startup mentality to that organization. And it was around that time, so I just gave you an example there of, I also work as a volunteer, and I try to turn them into a startup as well. And yeah, at the moment, I'm over 5 years now. I've been a trustee of a secondary breast cancer charity here in Scotland. That's where I live. And the reason I got involved in that is very personal to me. I'd had breast cancer, so primary breast cancer, and had never heard of secondary breast cancer, and thought that was quite bad, and thought that I should do something about that, and joined the board and actually chaired the board of that charity. It was a really young charity founded by a patient, so a lady that has secondary breast cancer, and she had this vision and was looking for a team to help enable that vision. So yeah, that's a little side project.
Wow, that's really amazing that you wanted to continue to make a difference to other people. I understand now you're actually still organizing something with them, right? What's the charity called?
The charity is called Make Seconds Count, and we've just appointed a CEO, which is exciting. So it's kind of reaching its kind of scale up phase, I guess we would say, in the startup world. It doesn't really work in the charity world, but what it's allowing is for the board to take less of an operational role and more of a governance role, which is great.
At what point did you join AdInMo in their journey? Were you there from the very beginning?
I wasn't, no. There were two co-founders, and I joined in 2020, and when they'd raised their first seed round, and helped build the team. So early enough, but yeah, not part of the founding team.
Awesome. And I guess as we're talking now about holding these different executive roles, how did you really make that transition? Because I think that the focus of being C-suite versus primarily a people manager is quite different, and it's also a totally different role depending on the size of the company. So maybe if you can let us know, what were the things that you did to prepare yourself for that shift, and why a role like a COO appeals to you versus any of those other board or C-suite positions.
I'd been a COO in my previous roles, so I'd grown into that. So I'd had marketing roles and commercial roles, but I am very operational. I'm a doer. I like to get things done, and I like to do them well. So it was a natural fit, and also into so having the commercial understanding, but that kind of planning skills. I mentioned that right at the start, and I'd really grown into that role. My first COO role was when Player X got acquired, and obviously with acquisitions, then teams move, and I was the most senior person that didn't leave, and I spent 12 months working on the integration of the acquisition into the parent company. Quite a difficult role, but yeah, I learned lots in that time. So I kind of knew what I was letting myself in for when joining AdInMo. I understand the variety and of responsibilities that you have as a COO. For me, the learning when it comes to the leadership has actually been more around the board. So the transition of being a board director. I had plenty of board experience. So I was a board director at the trade body, and I chair the trustee board of the charity that I mentioned. But I definitely had that mindset of reporting to a board, and that being the decision making, and kind of reporting upwards.
So over this time, did you develop a leadership style, and how would you describe your personal philosophy and how you like to implement it in your company?
I definitely expect and set very high standards. I like to feel that I set examples of my work ethic and how I approach things, and hope that that inspires a team to do the same. I also know that I do set high expectations, and therefore also make sure that I'm going the extra mile either to support people to achieve the goals that have been set. I'm known to be fair, but also not a pushover. Last year we had a workshop, and maybe this is probably what I get called more. We did personality tests and all of that kind of stuff to do team building exercises. We were talking about collaboration, etc. And my personality type was called the defender, whose traits included a deep sense of responsibility to those around them. And the kind of cartoon image, because it was all gamified, was of a nurse. I wouldn't ever describe myself as that, but actually it's that kind of caring mother figure, maybe because I'm also a little bit older than a lot of the team. That probably is fairly accurate. That consider AdInMo has a real family culture and a very flat hierarchy. And yeah, you really want to care and nurture the best talent in your business, and understand what's, not to be nosy about people's personal lives, but understand what's happening, if that is positively or negatively affecting the ability to perform, and understand that, but also what their personal career goals are. We were founded during the pandemic, so we didn't meet each other in person, and all of the experiences that other leaders and founders will have had in the last 5 years. But added to that, we also have our tech team in the Ukraine. And so that was certainly a sliding door moment of realizing the responsibility that you have as a leader when you are looking at things that are way out of your control, and how do we plan for that? How do we allow for that, etc. And I hope that, I think that's defined our culture a little bit, because we've really obviously supported the team, but we've done fundraising for the war efforts, and it's a really big part of a big part of our culture. But even there, it was amazing how the normalization of the fact that we were talking about bomb alerts in our everyday vernacular, in team meetings. We today now we still have a daily stand up every single day, and there's always some discussion whether we need that. And honestly, we wanted to check that everybody was alive every day, and that just check in is remains really important for the team that's in the Ukraine. Then work became that discipline, that focus, and was actually really positive in those early days of what was unthinkable to anybody that's not experienced that.
Yeah, and I imagine trying to maintain a sense of psychological safety for the team, both for their relationships with each other and their well-being, but also that the company could continue on even if there was a lot of disruption to work schedules. Was quite difficult.
Yeah, and the key to that is communication and sensitivity, and understanding. But it's remaining professional. There's a job. We can't not deliver. Any startup doesn't have the slack to not be high performant. But yeah, just really looking at safeguarding and being mindful of those situations has taught me a lot as a leader.
Mm-hmm. I'm also curious how this remote aspect and everything that you guys have been doing on the product side also played into really building relationships on the other side of the market that you're targeting. So I think not everyone in gaming realizes that every time you're building an ad network and ad tools as a platform, you're really not just trying to make a pitch to games on how you're trying to serve your players well, but you're also pitching to brands and other ad network aggregators as well, that this inventory or games that their ads will be shown in are really going to be the right market for them and will resonate. And although I know now we're saying more and more that, everyone is a gamer, Subway Surfers has been downloaded, I think, over 4 billion times at this point, which is about half of the population has played it at some point. You don't just have this, oh, gamers are this male audience that is very core. And I think in some ways the marketing industry has moved on from that stereotype, but there's still not a great understanding of just how diverse a single game can be and the different demographics that it can hold. Like, I know when I was at King, we had to do a lot of our own market and business research to work with brands that actually Candy Crush was not all soccer moms, and that when you have over 200 million monthly active users, there's people of all different interests and demographics there to be marketed to, and that we had a research on gamer dads playing Candy Crush, and also during Pride that I think the LGBT populations were overrepresented by like 3x in gaming worlds, especially ones where you can build your own avatar. But really, there was a lot of catching up that the marketing industry had to do to realize that you could be delivering value to these brands as you also were to the players. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how you figured out the resonance when you're straddling both sides of two markets who just historically haven't really seen eye to eye.
And I think education is still absolutely essential for the advertising industry to understand games. I think there's lots of excitement around, the numbers during the pandemic. So the size of the market is clear. I think the fact, because of the size, as you say, there's an assumption that you can reach different players. But as soon as you look at inventory, genres, then stereotypes in terms of who plays what game come back very quickly, or conversations around brand safety, obviously super important, but an assumption that an action game is bad, and when it's about the audience and that is playing that action game that brand is actually trying to reach. So I think also cherry picking titles, wanting to be in the titles that they've heard of, even if they've never played Fortnite, is also still part of our challenge, because our inventory is diverse, all genres, publishers that large publishers, small publishers, indies, and it's about the reach that we have there. So yeah, education is key. I think it's would be better done as an industry rather than individually, so that you're looking at really understanding a whole new media channel, because that's what we're creating.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're describing here is searching for product market fit, which any of us in startups know can often be an uncanny valley filled with pivots, right? So maybe can you let us know more about AdInMo's process as you guys were looking for that product market fit? Because now you're starting to expand, think a little bit outside of your original flagship billboard in play ads to incorporating things like click. Now you have an audio product. Was it a bumpy ride from there, or how did you kind of figure out your meandering way?
Meandering, yes. No startup's a smooth ride. You have to be able to react to the market feedback, the speed of adoption, and because we're a two-sided marketplace, the speed of adoption with developers who are interested in new monetization, but need to know that will be incremental and not cannibalize existing revenue streams. And then on the advertiser side, very interested, games is new, sexy, etc. But there's lots of other media channels there as well. I don't think the core player centric experience and privacy first approach are the fundamentals of AdInMo. What we're really seeing now emerge as product market fit is that we in game we want to be able to serve the right message at the right time to the right player. That, however, doesn't necessarily mean that message is always an ad for Coca-Cola or Nike. So originally our non-clickable formats, because that was all about player immersion and not allowing players to leave the game, or not needing to leave the game. that was attractive, but actually at the right time, at the right moment, that may be okay for the player. They're interested in engage. If the message is relevant, they may want to go and action the advertising message that they see. So our product market fit, and I talked about the project that I'm working on at the moment, which is getting ready for our next release. And this is really evolving AdInMo's product suite to talk to our core audience, which is the developers, and introduce different hybrid monetization products.
Yeah, and when you're looking at how to build the right tooling in what might be a bit of a different area than just focusing on the ad side of the business, how are you really researching this opportunity space to kind of know what you might not know you don't know, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we're at the moment we're doing two core things. We're talking to our developer community, and we have a beta program that our existing developers and interested publishers and developers can join and really help shape the products from a feature point of view, and to understand the use cases and how our products could be used. So when AdInMo first started, then we often talked about the fact that the example of where an ad for one game interrupting the ad for a competing game was the best outcome, where the best possible outcome could be that player left the game because the developer then got paid an ad impression. And so we actually made the decision to ban any adverts for games on AdInMo's network. But that was the wrong decision for the right reasons. And that's part of that kind of learning and iterative process that having ads for IAPs, for other games within a publisher portfolio, so cross promotions, could absolutely be right for the player and right for the developer. So the beta program is really important for that market feedback. The other thing that we're doing at the moment is looking at, rather than the individual use case, looking at the trends impacting the free-to-play ecosystem on an industry level. We've partnered with a specialist company who has a community of ad monetization managers, user acquisition managers, and teams that are looking at product and in-app purchases to do an industry survey looking at the trends. So kind of looking at how 5 years on the impact of privacy regulations have, if they have, affected the monetization mix. So the mix between only monetizing with ads, and not necessarily the ad formats that AdInMo has, but traditional ad monetization formats, so kind of rewarded videos, etc., versus in-app purchases, looking at things like the plans for publishers having their own stores, so direct purchases, looking at alt app stores and all of these kind of topics. So we actually have a live survey at the moment that we're really keen to get as many people as possible to give their views, because different publishers of different sizes will be on really different journeys when it comes to these big trends, and trying to pick what that means and how AdInMo can be the solution for some of those trends, then market insights is really important.
Yes, and we will include a link to the survey in the show notes here. So it would be great if anyone listening could lend their voice to this. I think the survey will remain open until around August for any of our late listeners after this publishing date. But I think that is a really interesting reframing of, instead of thinking that the ad formats are just like windows into ad inventory, thinking of it as really just like a messaging system, where here you can show a picture or a video to the player and what really is the best link to send them to, what is the right message for them to see. Um, I think as we're just starting to wind up a little bit here, what are some of your key learnings really from building this business with AdInMo and how it's grown over time?
I think the need to commit to your vision and really have that underpin every product decision you make. but also recognize that you will make some wrong decisions and it's okay to change that. I think from a COO point of view, looking at the processes that you need in a startup, then figuring out when to introduce processes that might feel formal for the size of team that you are versus the benefit of having that structure. I think that's been a key learning for me personally. A good example of that, more on the development side, would be we did not have agile development as a development framework from day one. We kind of had a version of that, but not the rigor and discipline of full agile development. And we've introduced that this year, and after kind of the usual learning curve, we're really starting to see the benefit of that. So it's that kind of scale and timing lessons. And then also kind of recognizing the external climate, the fundraising climate, trying to match that with your own journey, be it product market fit or your own financial needs. I think you can't operate in a bubble.
But you can fundraise in a bubble, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
it's okay. Just say you're now coming out with a new L3 chain token. Then you got it.
Exactly. So yeah, I would say there's some of the key learnings. Yeah, and just how important communication is across the team, transparency and good communication. We're back to remote working.
Great. And for those who are kind of looking at their different career options and you sitting at the intersection of both gaming and advertising, what really do you see as the similarities in the career paths there that might apply to people looking to branch out?
Branch out of the games industry?
Yeah, either people in advertising who are thinking of taking their first gaming role or people in gaming who are looking at like, oh, really, what might my transferable skills be into adjacent industries? I know we've seen a huge market correction, so we do have some people who are thinking about supporting the gaming ecosystem or taking similar roles in adjacent companies or verticals.
I think that so in-game advertising is a great example of the broadening of what working in games as opposed to working in the games industry. AdInMo and the team, some come from the ad tech industry, some come from the games industry. We sit in the middle of both. And I think that is really exciting for future career development. I think you'll see much more, as games becomes a bigger media channel, then people with games insights. So kind of all of the stories you shared today around the player insights that the publishers that you've worked for have, that's super interesting to advertisers who are always looking at this from an audience point of view. And so you really see the transferable, the knowledge and the transferable skills there. So to help brands develop their gaming strategy, or if you look at charities, then fundraising and games, particularly streaming, is a huge new revenue stream for charities, and someone understanding that part of the games industry would be really interesting for that stakeholder. I could go on and on and on. It's be it the regulatory aspect or any of these things that you're able to apply. So I definitely think that the intersection is there. I also think the fact that the roles are more diversified in terms of data scientists and all of the things we've talked about today in terms of monetization, etc. They, do they sit in the commercial role, in the product role? These are questions that the games industry asks, but I think that they're also crossover into other sectors as well. I think the true experts in their field need to be celebrated more, and those roles should be recognised as core industry roles within the games industry now, I'm talking. So yeah, I think there's a career in games has many rich opportunities.
I think that's very true. If anything, I wish that there was more industry recognition of the ways that games play into multiple areas of our life and are really just becoming a platform for viewing more media as well.
Definitely, they're a social channel. They're a safe place for communities, and yeah, I absolutely agree with you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Joe. I feel like I learned more about you over this episode, and we've known each other for years. I had no idea about the Making Seconds Count charity. So thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. I am growing a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. If you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders, because we have so much more we can learn from each other. If you've enjoyed this episode, please follow and rate the show on Spotify or your other favorite podcast platform. It will help other growing leaders to discover the show and benefit from the valuable insights. If you would like to grow rapidly your leadership skills, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, where you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership and other resources that I offer. Have a great week, and remember to take care of yourself. Until the next time.